Well, our specialist reporter Karen Moon has been tracking the CPS story for us for some time now. She joins us in studio with a few more details of what's emerged in the last few minutes about the CPS contract. Karen, we're looking here, correct me if I'm wrong, at the price of administering the grants.
Absolutely. This is not the cost of the grants themselves. It's the cost that CPS says it needs per month and for over the next 2 years in total in order to continue paying social grant beneficiaries the money that is due to them. Now, remember, there was a lot of controversy in the Constitutional Court yesterday because CPS has said we don't want to be paid per beneficiary as we have been in the past. We want a lump sum. So essentially what they've said is that according to us and according to inflation-related increases, it will cost in the region of 4.6 billion rand over the next 2 years in total for us to administer the social grants system. So that amount is not, in fact, the grants themselves. That runs into the billions.
Karen, just talk us through exactly what this comes down to per person at the cost that CPS is talking about today.
Well, originally they'd said it was 16 Rand 44 that they were getting paid. Now they're sort of deviating anywhere between 17 and 18 Rand something for each person. And that, of course, is far cheaper, according to them, than the offer that the post office has put it on the table for 20 Rand per person. They've also come up and said the post office wholly underestimates the level of infrastructure, the kind of things that they will need to put in place, the re-registration of all these social grants recipients that will need to take place before the system can be operational. So raising again this issue of the costs to the post office to take over, and also suggesting quite powerfully that this argument that the post office has made that it could do this in less than a month or a month's time is simply not backed up by the level of work that needs to be done.
Now, if I remember correctly, CPS had initially gone up to as far as 25 Rand per beneficiary in its initial quote. How's it been able to drop it to 17 Rand?
Well, I think we're getting some kind of insight into the negotiation process that went on between Sassa and CPS. But also what is interesting is that they're not wedded to these amounts either. They've also said, look, we are happy to go along with the terms of the illegal contract, the illegal 2012 contract that was reached with us. And the Auditor General can then decide on an increase for us linked to inflation. So, there has been arguably a kind of hyperbolic rhetoric coming from CPS, also in terms of this idea that the court has a very tight deadline in which to make this decision by and to or allow for this deal in whatever form to continue. But we had in its initial documents or letters that were sent from CPS to Sassa saying that we need between 22 Rand or 25 Rand in order to continue this deal, and that seems to have dropped quite substantially. And as I said before, they're now saying also the Auditor General can determine the increase that is equitable and fair to them in light of inflation.
Well, one of the main issues on the story is, of course, the issue of the protection of the database itself and who that information can be shared with, for what purposes. Does this new contract or the proposed contract in any way suggest what's going to happen with regard to that?
Well, what is extraordinary is that we saw Black Sash going to the Constitutional Court to try and force a resolution of this matter. And one of the main grounds that they brought was this protection of the information of grants recipients. CPS has now annexed the draft agreement that it reached with Sassa, in which it very much appears that the original conditions that Sassa had asked for in terms of, that information being owned totally by Sassa and no sharing of the information have been quite substantially relaxed. Essentially, this new deal, the proposed deal, which was a draft, which hasn't been finalized, stated that the Grindrod Bank, which is subcontracted by CPS to provide banking services and Sassa cards to grant recipients, I think in the region of 60% of them, has now had ownership of that FICA information of the private beneficiaries' details. And also there's another clause that says, if this information is required by other contractors, it can be shared because, you know, the FICA information, etc. So there's been a substantial climb down from the original SASSA agreement, which didn't allow that. Of course, you know, Ama Bungane doing excellent work around this issue of what CPS has said in terms of, you know, absolutely denying under oath to the Constitutional Court that it shares recipient information, but very much a suggestion that this biometric information is readily available to subsidiaries or, you know, of Net1, which of course is CPS's parent company, should grant recipients apply for loans, funeral policies, airtime, even electricity.
Very interesting indeed. Karen, thanks so much for talking us through that. Our specialist reporter, Karen Morn, giving us the latest figures there on that proposed CPS deal.